industries so that you enable new entrants enter into these and also promote this shared economy for all South Africans. I think one of the fundamentals is that if you don't transform aggressively ownership patterns,
absolutely,
who is part of the factors of production, you don't see change in terms of ownership of land, capital, and also access to finance. These are the barriers that prohibit and constrain economic growth along our consistent framework. So we see inequality patterns in South Africa, Gini coefficient, Gini index. If you look at Human Development Index and all these indices that look at general economic development, we haven't been able to shift. So you have to have a transformative agenda around that aspect. These are some of the aspects, and I think we can ponder as we go forward on the strategic pillars.
Right. Now, talk to us. You talk about patterns of ownership, and we know that the structure of the economy has not really changed much in the last 30 years of our democracy. And there are also, I mean, this is also findings from the National Planning Commission that we still have high levels of concentration and monopolies. So what are your views? What ideas are you putting forth in terms of restructuring the economy and ensuring that, you know, we change these patterns of ownership that you are speaking to?
First, you've got to industrialize. You've got to target the doubling of manufacturing value add as a share of GDP. You've got to move away from primary sector activities to your high value goods. So we talk about agriculture contributing large proportions in terms of employment. It captures the masses of the unemployed. Parallel to that, there has to be evidence-based industrialization strategies that we employ that have been proven to work. So we've got incentives and instruments that are being used for certain subsectors, but they're not yielding results in terms of job intensity. We're not seeing the broadening the participation of Black people, youth, Black women in the employment particularly. So you've got to rectify this misalignment. Secondly, you've got to mobilize finance if we're going to change the oligopolistic behavior that you referred to, if we're going to change the concentration of 3 or 4 companies, we call it the HHI index, when we look at how much turnover is attributed to 1 or 2, or is there more than a certain proportion of turnover from one dominant firm? And this you can only change by having new entrants that are supported with a mix of incentives, but also have access to new markets at a regional level and also at a continental level. So how do you revise that? You've got to strengthen our commitment to financing new entrants. We've got to have very directed, redeveloped incentives using IDC, which is the Industrial Development Corporation, which is, and the smaller entity, which is like the National Empowerment Fund, to locally source inputs and locally source new production from new enterprises, local firms that broaden participation. And this has to be very deliberately done. It cannot be by chance.
Right. So if we're talking about specifically localization and, you know, reviving the township economy, how have you given any thought to the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, and how does that fit into, you know, the ideas that you're putting forth in terms of ensuring, you're speaking about markets, market access, you know, for new entrants, for new industrialists. How do you foresee that taking shape?
One of the very important aspects when we talk township economy, I think that it's a quarter of South Africans live in the townships. We see a plethora of what I call fast-moving consumer goods that if you look at the most used brands, it's our day-to-day brands, whether you're looking at shoe polish, whether you're looking at baked beans, whether you're looking at maheu, whether you're looking at retailers, franchises that we buy from day to day. I don't want to mention any specifically, but you get a sense of what I'm talking about. These
Absolutely.
are not just in the townships, but also in the rural areas. How much of the local value chains are part and parcel of distribution and participating in linkages in these value chains? I think that's number one. Fundamental, if I consume in my household income, I have, whether I get 1,000 Rand into that household, about 70%, if I'm a low income household, I use for food. The way you fundamentally change the framing and the modeling of our economy is part and parcel of what I use every day in my day to day, the production of food and processed foods, we should have a multiplier effect in our local economies, linking both your township economies and your rural nodes to these inputs. And so what you've got to do now is you've got to break up what are the food and also any other products that there are opportunities and economic activity opportunities that don't require significant inputs. If you look at things like chips, if you look at things like cola, if you look at things like uniforms, children polish their school shoes every day. We have soap. These are many products that can be used with very little capital intensive inputs, but you can have large scale interventions that are organized, that transform township livelihoods, rural livelihoods. Then you look at your macro, which are your bigger corporations, and we're not only looking at the micro level, micro, medium, and your macro, which then you look at production of funding for these products that are in the retail value chain. If you don't break and penetrate into the value chains where most people are buying, where most people spend their household income on, whether it's the clothing, whether it's the furniture products, whether it's the consumption of food, these are the things where we have to deliberately look at the post-apartheid liberalization of broadening economic participation. And I think that they remain delinked. And so the strategy in the new wine talks about industrialization. We've highlighted certain to now break down what instruments to use, what mechanisms, what current state subsidized cheap credit needs to be enhanced, and the entities that need to be financed and recapitalized, particularly in the agricultural sector, because I think these are the quick wins where we improve market access and improve linkages to retail and the agricultural sector of those who are not there currently. So you've got to have massive entry, small and large scale commercial black farmers, commercial producers, commercial industrializers, or those who are in processing of some of these stuffs that I've spoken about and products. So I think there's massive opportunity, but we're not organized as much as we need to be.
Dr. Maliko, as we look at the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, and we look at that's an existing plan, obviously put out by government, as you've also spoken on various other platforms commenting on, the efficacy of this plan. But talk to us about how do you then take all these progressive ideas that is packaged in this your document, this paper that you've put out, because obviously it is about coordinating, it is about adding value and infusing, best practices and ideas that have the potential to take the country forward. How do we bring in these ideas and infuse them and build them into existing plans so that we can be able to accelerate forward as a country?
Let's build the state capacity. That's the one thing. Let's create an environment within the state where if I come up with innovative ideas, if I come up with risk taking, if I come up with solutions as an official, I am not seen as regressive. I am not seen as someone who is taking things back, but rather someone who is taking things forward. If I get young economists, young professionals into the public sector, and they come in and they want to implement some of these strategies, the relationships between those who have been there for a long time and those who are coming in, let me tell you, if we can synergize and have a developmental approach to say, let's innovate, let's rather work away from report management and reporting on what we have planned to do against reporting, but rather innovation and impact, an adaptive approach that looks at impact every day, we would have a capacity in the state. And I think this is where the focus must be: collaboration and having some kind of organization of the state. Now, if I can further elaborate, if we look at COVID-19, we were able to organize the state into a council. We were able to put business and all the other departments. We were able to use state data, look at the performance of each of the hotspots in the district level to see the impact and the efficacy of efforts. Now, at an economic level, we have never done something like that before. Why don't we organize all of the economic agents, institutions, whether it's finance institutions, looking at the Reserve Bank, putting together the economic cluster, whether it's DTIC, small business development, energy, all of those clusters of economic strength. Why they're not in a council where the president, together with business, the trade unions, and all of government work together towards building whatever it is that is necessary so we can see a growth that yields more than 1%, so that we can see an unemployment rate declining from currently over 45% in 6 or 7 provinces down to less than 10%. Why don't we put together a collaboration and cooperation amongst the state agencies, even at a local level and a district level, so that this institutional paralysis that we're seeing in the state is end by data evidence. So we use the data that Stats SA is giving us. We monitor that data monthly. We act based on the data, and then we respond and see if our efforts accordingly are sufficient for the development challenges that we have. So I think we need to look at reorganizing, collaborating, and also putting urgency more so in terms of some of these outliers and some of these key issues, actually not outliers, key issues that are critical problems of South Africa right now that we haven't been able to sufficiently deal with.
Wonderful. Dr. Moleko, that's unfortunately where we have to leave it for now, but I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for making the time to be with us and for the high-level insights shared.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Ntabiseng Moleko is, of course, a development economist at the Stellenbosch School of Business. We are literally minutes away from the Minister of Finance's budget speech. With that said, do stay tuned for more after this.
Honored members, in the light of the difficult financial conditions faced by municipalities, addressing the ESCOM problem without dealing with the municipal non-payment and uptake of debt relief programs would have been counterproductive. The debt relief engagement arrangement for ESCOM outlined in 2023 budget noted that a large portion of outstanding municipal debt is owed to ESCOM. National government has introduced support to relieve municipalities of debt to ESCOM. Upon application by a municipality, the debt to ESCOM up to the 31st of March 2023 will be written off over a 3-year period of equal annual tranches. This is providing the municipalities complies with a set of conditions. These conditions include enforcing strict credit controls, enhanced revenue collection, and up-to-date payment of current account owed to ESCOM. By October 2023, 67 applications had been submitted, totaling 56.8 billion, or 97% of total municipal debt owed to ESCOM at the end of March 2023. 28 applications have been approved. The remainder are being assessed and verified by provincial treasuries. The ultimate goal is the profound transformation of these municipalities by enabling them to build financial resilience, amplify their capacity to generate sustainable revenue, and rekindle a culture of paying for service rendered.
You're still watching Parliament TV here on DSTV channel 408, and today is, of course, Budget Day. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will be delivering his speech, his budget speech, to the National Assembly here at the Cape Town City Hall. Before we get there, before we cross over to the chamber, I am now joined in studio by the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Dumisani Jantjies. Dr. Jantjies, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and greetings to your viewers as well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Talk to us firstly about, we know that South Africa is marking just about, we're 30 years into our constitutional democracy. We're a few weeks away from that, exact 30-year mark when South Africans went to go and cast their vote for the first time. But talk to us about how we have been able as a country to use fiscal policy to advance transformation.
Yes, thanks so much. I think you're right. It's 30 years down the line, and we've seen a lot of transformation in government service delivery. We've seen a lot of investment in many sectors, societal areas. over the years through the use of budget. We've seen more access to education by many households, more access to water. Many households, formal dwellings have increased. I think the trajectory we've seen quite a lot of development in our economy through the use of public finance, through the use of budget. And I think it's that's a lot to look back on to say what has been achieved. There are obviously some of the structural issues that also still stuck with us, particularly when you look at issues of unemployment. It's a big issue now, which a lot has been done in trying to create spaces over the years, support sectors of the economy, support small medium enterprises. But I think the support has not led to a lot of employment created. It's largely really has to do with the structure of the economy in part, but also a lot to do with the need for a very obvious industrial policy provisions that enables that development of many sectors that would ensure that we create more jobs in a more sustainable way, particularly when you look at how our economy was pre-COVID-19, pre-democracy, where we've seen that pre-94, where we've seen that we heavily relied on exports of minerals, yet they account for a very limited percentage of our GDP. But that has changed quite a lot. We see our GDP is quite diversified, but I think there's still a lot of reliant on primary sectors, your minerals, a lot of it, and hence you see over time, in recent times, if the commodity prices goes down or get fluctuated, we get impacted quite easily because we still rely heavily on that. So there's quite need to have a very obvious industrialization that take us more to secondary sector. In a way, what I'm saying, there won't be any shortcuts. And one of the concerns that we've raised now, and this is particularly recently, we say, look, we need to take a more macroeconomic reform that leads to that long-term thinking around where we can get more sustainable economic development, which prioritize secondary sectors in particular.
Dr. Jantjies, we are literally minutes away from the minister's speech, which he will be delivering at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And this will be the last speech, budget speech of the sixth dispensation. And some are calling it, are referring it to this speech as a legacy speech. What are the key features of this speech? If you can talk to us about the key, the analysis that you've done, and the guidance that you've given in terms of framing what is now contained in this budget.
Sure. I think what government has already set out its objectives for this in the midterm in October last year, and I think it was in November. But I think we've got fundamentally 4 or 3 priorities that has been put out by the president from last year's State of the Nation address. Even this year, it's really a lot to look about ensuring employment creation, energy security, dealing with crime, and some of those other issues. I think for us as well, our consistent analysis has always been that we need to have a very obvious thinking around where will employment be created in the economy. And the budget has to be strongly saying that. When you look at the public employment program was introduced by the president in the recent time, presidential employment initiatives has done quite a lot of progress. We've seen a lot of progress around that. But I think with a number of unemployments that we have in our economy, we need to have clear indicative areas where this is how budget will create employment in a more explicit way, or which sectors of the economy we see as more priority to really lead to the employment. And as an issue that we've been raising a lot of times, issue around investments. We've seen a lot of investment, particularly around energy security, around rail, transportation, and those areas, but also even at the localized level, maintenance of infrastructure. Those are really key areas, in our view, can lead to a lot of opportunities for creating more investment or more employment within our society.
Indeed. As you conclude very briefly, we are literally going to be crossing over in a few minutes. What is the impact and the legacy of the Budget Office? Very, very briefly.
It's the thesis question, but I think the impact has been to provide very useful insight to show members what is the impact of the budget it has on the economy and society, and also within the budget itself, in a way that when the proposals come, we're able to say to members, this is likely to impact service delivery, this is how it's likely to build the economy, this is how it likes to impact the service delivery or public finance itself. That's in a very high level. showing how does the budget impact society and economy. That's very important for us.
Absolutely.
And I think something that we continue to do over time.
Fantastic. Dr. Jantjies, that's unfortunately where we have to leave it for now, but thank you so much for always gracing our platform to come and share those high-level insights.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Dr. Jantjies is, of course, the Director of the Budget Office in Parliament. We are now crossing over live to the chamber as members are arriving, and of course, as we know, this will be the last speech. The Minister of Finance will be delivering his final speech of the 6th dispensation, and some are calling it a legacy speech. But of course, what we are saying is that, a lot has been done. Yes, we're not where we want to be as a country, but of course, we keep on moving forward, as we bring together thought leaders, unpacking critical issues and major complex problems. But with that said, we are crossing over to the chamber. You will begin to see the visuals now as members begin to arrive.
One, two. This one is a bit there. This one is a bit there. Madam Speaker.
Now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order. Order. Honorable members, take your seats, please. Honorable members, take your seats. Before we proceed with today's business, I wish to announce that the vacancies which occurred in the National Assembly due to the passing of Ms. Alice Hlebani Mthembu and Ms. Violet Siwela have been filled by the nomination of Mr. Khulani Elphias Richard Hadebe and Ms. Nuran Muller, respectively, with effective from the 16th of February 2024. The members have been made and subscribed the oath in the Speaker's office. I welcome you, honorable members, to this National Assembly. Honorable members, the Secretary will now read the first order to third orders together.
Orders of the day: introduction, appropriation bill, and the tabling of the division of revenue bill. The second order: introduction, second adjustment appropriation 2023-2024 financial year bill. The third order of the day: introduction, gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account deferral amendment bill.
The Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngagula, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency Deputy President Paul Mashatile, Cabinet colleagues, members of the Executive Committee for Finance, honorable members, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, fellow South Africans. Madam Speaker, according to two prominent economists, Alberto Alsenia and Danny Rodrigues, they had this observation to say, and I quote, "A crude distinction between economics and politics would be that economics is concerned with expanding the pie, while politics is about distributing it." The point, Madam Speaker, is that the size and quality of the national pie is what informs and ultimately determines the realization of the political imperative of redistribution. Our mission over the past 30 years has been to restore both social and economic justice for our nation and to decisively address the inequality that was the hallmark of the system of discrimination and dispossession. The budgets we've tabled since 1994 have been about securing the goal of growing the economy so that we can do more to address the inequalities and deprivation that still scar our society and undermine the promise of democracy. So it is with a great sense of privilege and purpose that I stand before you to present the last budget of the 6th Democratic Administration. Siyabuya. Madam Speaker, I therefore table the following documents before this House. The 24 Division of Revenue Bill, the 2024 Appropriation Bill, the estimates of national expenditure, the 2024 Budget Review, the 2024 Fiscal Framework, the second Adjustment Appropriation Bill, the Budget Speech, the Gold and Foreign Exchange Contingency Reserve Account Deferral Amendment Bill. Allow me to begin, Madam Speaker, with the global outlook. Global growth is forecast to increase from 3.1% this year to 3.2% in 2025. The moderate improvement is due to growth in the United States and several large economies. There are downside risks from potential spikes in the global oil price if the conflict in the Middle East escalates, and if growth falters in China, the country's largest trading partner. Despite improved global outlook for 2024, South Africa's near-term growth remains hamstrung by lower commodity prices and structural constraints. We estimate real GDP growth of 0.6% in 2023. This is down from 0.8% growth estimated during the medium-term budget policy statement. The revision is due to weaker than expected outcomes in the third quarter of 2023, particularly in household consumption and fixed investment. Between 2024 and 2026, growth is projected to average 1.1%. The growth outlook is supported by the expected easing of power cuts as new energy projects begin production and as lower inflation supports household consumption and credit extension. But there are also risks to the domestic outlook. These include persistent constraints in electricity supply, freight rail and ports, and higher sovereign credit risks. Our challenge, honorable members, is that the size of the pie is not growing fast enough to meet our developmental needs. As such, our fiscal strategy to support economic growth, reduce risks to the economy while ensuring fiscal sustainability. Compared to a year ago, the budget deficit for 2023-24 is estimated to worsen from 4% to 4.9% of GDP. The higher budget deficit means that debt service costs in 2023-24 have been revised higher by 15.7 billion to 356 billion. Debt service costs will absorb more than 20% of revenue. To put this into perspective, spending on debt service costs is greater than the respective budgets of social protection, health, or peace and security. For this reason, honorable members, we're strengthening our strategy and sticking to our fiscal goals. A net reduction of 80.6 billion in non-interest expenditure is being implemented over the medium term. At the same time, revenue has been revised up by 45.6 billion over the medium term relative to the medium-term budget policy statement. And we have taken the decision to introduce a reform of the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account, also known as GFECRA. Taken together, even with the spending increases I will announce later, the national government gross borrowing requirement will decline from 457.7 billion in 2024 to 428.5 billion in 26-27. The deficit will begin to improve from 24-24 to an estimated 4.5% of GDP, reaching 3.3% by 26-27. Debt will now peak at 75.3% of GDP in 25-26. All of this puts us in a position to continue to protect core services. It allows 60% of non-interest spending to be directed to the social wage. It allows us to preserve capital spending. Compared to the medium-term budget policy statement, we are adding 57.6 billion to pay for the salaries of teachers, nurses, doctors, among many other critical services. Madam Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, in this budget, we're announcing a reform of the GFECRA. GFECRA is an account held at the Reserve Bank that captures gains and losses on the country's foreign currency reserve transactions. Simply put, if the rand strengthens against the US dollar, and other reserve currencies, the account balance declines, and vice versa. The account balance has grown to over 500 billion over the years because the rand has depreciated over time. A new settlement arrangement is being introduced that will reduce government borrowing and improve the Reserve Bank's equity position. Ultimately, we are bringing South Africa closer to our peers and ensuring alignment to international best practices. We will draw down 150 billion rand of the GFECRA balance once we have ensured that the sufficient buffers are available to absorb exchange rate swings and the solvency of the Reserve Bank is not compromised. We have embarked on a broad structural reform agenda that aims to address the challenges that held back our growth. This agenda included areas like electricity, logistics, water, telecommunication, and visa reforms. The budget review details the good progress that has been made in these areas over the past few years, but obstacles remain. And let me focus on the two largest of these. Load shedding is a problem that confronts all South Africans. It disrupts production, operations, livelihoods. Reforming the sector will result in long-term energy security. We took the necessary decision in the past 5 years, and these are beginning to are bearing fruit. To promote further investment in renewables, this budget proposes an increase in the limit for renewable energy projects that can qualify for carbon offset regime from 50 megawatts to 30 megawatts. Eskom continues to be a key role player in the electricity sector, and the debt relief plan allows the entity to focus on its core business. We will release the report on the independent review of Eskom's coal-fired power stations in the coming week. The review was done to inform part of the conditions attached to the debt relief plan. The recommendations will fit into Eskom's corporate plans to bolster accountability and oversight. It is true the combination of private investment in new energy projects, rooftop solar installations, and improvements in Eskom generation fleet that load shedding will reduce, and reliability and security of supply improve. In addition, to support these efforts, we're introducing a new 2 billion conditional grant over the medium term to fund the rollout of smart prepaid meters. This will begin with the municipalities that have been approved for debt relief. To address South Africa's increasingly unreliable logistics system, Cabinet approved the Freight Logistic Roadmap in December 2023. The roadmap outlines immediate steps needed to improve port equipment, locomotive availability, and network security. It also sets out a clear path for enhancing efficiencies, facilitating the introduction of competition, and leveraging financial and technical support of the private sector. In this regard, third-party access to the freight rail network will be introduced by May 2024. In ports, private partner has been secured to upgrade Pier 2 of the Durban Container Terminal. This should increase private investment in equipment, enhance technological capability, and improve operational efficiencies. Government has provided Transnet with a 47 billion guarantee facility to support the entity's recovery plan and meet its immediate debt obligation. Like Eskom, the guarantees come with conditions. These conditions require Transnet to focus on its core activities and for the entity to introduce private sector partnerships. This will improve Transnet's sustainability and support the implementation of the roadmap. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to announce that as part of this budget, we're introducing fundamental and far-reaching reforms to infrastructure financing and delivery. The reforms are to optimize the infrastructure value chain to be effective and efficient. In this way, we will strengthen the public investment management and the associated value chain. We will also attract private sector participation. In this regard, we gazetted amendments to the PPP regulatory framework on for public comments early this week, Minister Kubai. These amendments seek to reduce procedural complexity undertaking PPPs, creating capacity to support and manage PPPs, formulate clear rules for managing unsolicited bids, and strengthening the governance of fiscal risk. We are reviewing institutional arrangements and governance for catalytic infrastructure. The intention is to create clearer mechanisms for accountability, cooperation, and coordination. We are also consolidating similar functions to reduce duplication and inefficiencies. The intention is to fast-track delivery, particularly of blended finance arrangements. We are introducing several financing instruments, such as infrastructure bonds and concessional loans. As part of this, a flow-through tax vehicle for specific infrastructure projects, similar to trusts and other investment vehicles, is being considered. A new funding window for proposal under the new dispensation of financing instruments will be open to the public institution shortly. What does that mean? Those who know BFI, it's a new window of BFI. Through these reforms, greater efficiency gains and infrastructure delivery will be fast-tracked. This will benefit network sectors, social infrastructure, PPPs, and blended finance projects. Madam Speaker, the National Treasury plays a crucial role in mobilizing resources, designing incentives, and influencing policy to mainstream climate change. As climate-related disasters intensify and multi-layer risk-based approach is being developed to manage the associated fiscal risk. This considers various funding instruments from grants to contingency funds, including climate change response fund, depending on the incidence and intensity of the disaster event. The National Treasury is reviewing disaster response grants to improve efficiency and create incentives for disaster planning, preparedness, and risk reduction. It is also developing a climate budget tracking framework to influence policy, planning, and budget decisions by tracking climate-related expenditure in public budgets. The support of concessional funding providers such as multilateral development banks is going a long way to support our climate adaptation, mitigation, and energy transition, and sustainability initiatives. Crowding in the private sector is necessary to manage the climate disaster funds. The government has raised $3.3 billion so far from multilateral development banks and international finance institutions to support climate change, energy, and just transition objectives. We are actively participating in climate negotiations, aligning with government advocacy for reforming multilateral finance institutions. We are also working with the 8 municipalities to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate weather-related events by providing technical assistance for climate-responsive capital projects. The electric vehicle white paper outlines our strategy to transition towards a broader energy vehicle production and consumption in South Africa. Starting with electric vehicles, it aims to transition the automotive industry from primarily producing internal combustion engine vehicles to a dual platform that includes electric vehicles by 2035. To encourage the production of electric vehicles in South Africa, government will introduce an investment allowance for new investment beginning from the 1st of March 2026. This will allow producers to claim 150% of qualifying investment spending on electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles in the first year. The incentive will be implemented in addition to the existing support under the Automotive Production Development Program. Government has also reprioritized 964 million over the medium term to support transition to electric vehicles. Honorable members, the public procurement bill was expeditiously passed by the National Assembly. The amended bill has now been referred to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. National Treasury is supporting provincial legislators as they process the bill and conduct nationwide public hearings. The bill provides for transformation measures that through set aside, pre-qualification, advancement of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. These measures will be applicable to specified categories of persons, including small enterprise owned by Black people, Black women, Black youth, Black people with disabilities, and enterprises with particular geographic area, including enforcement of transformation through the BBBE level status. The bill also makes provision for local industrialization through designation and measures for sustainable development, labor absorption, and enterprise development, among others. We're well aware that currently procurement processes often fall short of delivering the cost-effective solution to government's needs. Too often, there's a substantial disparity between the prices government is being charged and the prevailing market price. For instance, I'm told the government buys ICT hardware such as laptops, uninterrupted power supply devices, monitors, and toners at between 1.5 and 1.2 or 2 times more than market price. Given that government buys in large quantities, we should in fact be paying less and leveraging our buying power to get more value for our money. Obtaining value for money as a principle of efficiency, transparency, and competition remain paramount. And we want to assure South Africans that these principles are not incompatible with transformation. Honorable members, the weak performance of our economy has resulted in sharp deterioration in tax revenue collection for 23-24. Yaqala indaba ndiza kule ndawo enzima ye-tax. At 1.73 trillion, tax revenue for 23-24 is 56.1 billion lower than estimated in the 2023 budget. The shortfall is largely due to the decline in corporate profits and revenue for taxes on mining. Over the medium term, revenue projections are 45.6 billion higher than the 2023 medium-term budget policy estimates, which increased personal income tax and additional medium-term revenue proposals. This budget contains tax measures that will raise 15 billion in 2024-25 to alleviate immediate fiscal pressures and support faster debt stabilization. Revenue is mostly raised through personal income tax, but not adjusting tax brackets, rebates, and medical tax credits for inflation. For alcohol products, excise duties above inflation increases of between 6.7 and 7.27% for 24-25 are proposed. This means a can of beer increases by 14 cents. A can of cider and alcohol fruit beverage goes by 14 cents. A bottle of wine costs an extra 28 cents. Mthembu say safe. A bottle of fortified wine will cost an extra 47 cents. A bottle of sparkling wine will cost an extra 89 cents. Wait, a bottle of spirits, including whiskey, bafowethu, gin and vodka increases by 5.53, 5 rand 53 cents. Salim Bangalamato. We're also proposing to no sbeto BE apho basinganxa. Ku whiskey nezazinto sishayo BE uba ulapho ke na ulimele mfowethu. We're also proposing increased tobacco excise duty by 4.7% for cigarettes and cigarettes tobacco, and by 82% for pipe tobacco. This translates into R9.51 increase for cigars. Yabona ke chubana nalimala. 97 cents increase to a pack of cigarette, and an extra 57 cents for a pipe of tobacco. Hamkhelo Mkhane from Soweto, one of the over 2,700 South Africans who sent budget tips to the minister, has a suggestion I would like to share. Kamo says, I quote, I would suggest an introduction of a tax payment for hubbly bubbly as a cigarette and other alternatives. The country has seen an increase in a number of youth smoking these products, and parents are not pleased with this at all. Close quote. I would like to say to Kamo, as a parent myself, I agree with you. I'm certain the Minister of Health also agrees. You'll be happy to hear that we are tabling an increase of the excise duty on electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems known as vapes to R3.04 per milliliter. On environmental taxes, the carbon tax increased from 159 to 190 rand per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent from the 1st of January 2024. The carbon fuel levy will increase, not the fuel levy, the carbon fuel levy will increase to 11 cents per litre of petrol and 14 cents per litre for diesel, effective from the 3rd of April. A discussion paper outlining proposal for the second phase of the carbon tax will be published for public comment later in the year. Madam Speaker, we are mindful of the already high cost of living, the impact fuel prices have on the food and transport costs. In this regard, we are proposing no increases to the general fuel levy for 24-25. This will result in a tax release of around 4 billion. This is money back in the pockets of consumers. Madam Speaker, progress has been made on the two-pot retirement system since I last addressed you during the medium-term budget policy system. Contribution to retirement funds will be split with 1/3 going into a savings component, 2/3 going into a retirement component. Now, ndifuna ukwezicacisa le nto ke mntakwethu. Ndifuna ucacisa le nto. Abantu bandistopa bonke esitratweni bandibuza uba iphuma nini imali yethu. Nibaxelele ke ngomalungu eParliament xa nigoduka uba from i-1st kaSeptember bonke bazayifumana le mali. From i-1st kaSeptember laa mali yepension iyafumaneka. Nam funeka bayeke undiphazamisa endleleni. Ndinomnye udadewethu phaa oyitishala unozicelo usafuna ngokuba ndiyazi noyazi uba imali yena azayifumana ndizayazela phi ngoba kaloku uyawuyazi ngepension yakhe. So from the 1st of September 2024 silwile noJoe ngale. We must commend on Honorable Maswanga. He has been vociferous in making sure that this bill passes. And we even fought on the timelines. It was difficult to persuade him because the industry was not ready. He wanted to be effective from the 1st of April, but the industry was not ready, but he allowed us to postpone it to the 1st of September. Thank you, Comrade Maswangai. So, the two-pot system ensures that we strike a balance between preserving contributions to safeguard a better retirement for members while addressing the plight of the people to access some of their retirement funds to help ease their financial burden in times of distress. Over the next few years, we're also implementing a global minimum corporate tax to limit the negative effects of tax competition. Multinational corporations with an annual revenue exceeding 750 million euros will be subject to an effective tax rate of at least 15%, regardless of where their profits are generated. This is a global tax. That's why even the benchmark is euros. It's an agreement in the OECD. So we're beginning to implement that. So irrespective of where your profits are generated, the proposed reform is expected to yield an additional 8 billion in corporate tax revenue in 26-27. I encourage interested parties to provide comments on the draft global minimum tax bill published today. Our long-term tax policy strategies remain focused on broadening the tax base while improving tax compliance and administrative efficiency. Visible progress has been made in rebuilding and modernizing SARS. The tax authority has expanded the tax register, improved debt collections, and reduced fraudulent refunds and trade valuation. This has led to improvements in revenue collection. To address the higher levels of illicit tobacco, SARS is deploying CCTV and related technologies at licensed tobacco manufacturers. Investigations and prosecutions have resulted in 10 billion in additional assessment, of which over 4 billion has been collected from the key players in the illicit gold and tobacco industry. These and other efforts have assisted with the improvement in revenue. Our bigger challenge, as I've stated earlier, is that our pie is not growing fast enough, and this limits our ability to generate sufficient revenues to distribute among our priority areas. Madam Speaker, at the time of the 2023 medium-term budget policy statement, when revenue collection had performed much worse than anticipated, departments had to reprioritize spending and absorb the wage increases within their baseline. These measures were taken to protect our fiscal integrity. Equally, critical programs had to be protected. This is a practical expression of fiscal consolidation that supports delivery of core services and the social wage. Since then, we have been able to reverse some of the fiscal consolidation announced at the time of the medium-term budget policy statement. In this budget, I'm able to announce that the education sector is allocated an additional 25.7 billion for the carry-through cost of the wage increase over the medium term. At the same time, we're able to protect the budget of critical programs such as school nutrition programs, the program that provides food to pupils in almost 20,000 schools. The Early Childhood Development Grant is allocated a 1.6 billion, rising to 2 billion over the medium term. Health is allocated a total of 854 billion over the medium term. These allocations include 11.6 billion to address the 2023 wage agreement, 27 billion for infrastructure, 1.4 billion for the NHI grant over the same period. The allocation for the NHI is a demonstration of the government's commitment to this policy. There remain a range of system strengthening activities that are key enablers of an improved public healthcare system that must be undertaken. Such activities include building a national health information system and digital patients' records, upgrading health facilities and improving the quality of care to ensure that they meet the minimum criteria to be certified as accredited for contracting under NHI. Strengthening facilities and district management in preparation for contracting. Granting semi-autonomous status for central and potential other hospitals, and developing reference prices and provider payment methods for hospitals. Many of these activities are already underway, but require further development before the NHA can be rolled out at scale. Madam Speaker, there's also been significant progress in improving access to public transport services for low-income communities. The Rail Recovery Program of the Passenger Rail Agents of South Africa is continuing with 27 corridors reopened by December 2023. This will increase the number of passengers on Metro Rail from 15.6 million in 2022-23 to an estimated 48.6 million by 26-27. To ensure the effective discharge of office duties during elections and its other responsibility beyond the polls, the Independent Electoral Commission is allocated 2.3 billion. The police and the defense purely for the elections. The police and the defense purely for the elections are allocated an additional 350 million to support the elections. A further 200 million will be allocated for political party funding as political parties prepare for the general elections. Government also supports resettled farmers through land redistribution and tenure reform programs, which have been allocated 6 billion over the medium term. To keep pace with inflation and increase access, permanent social grants are increased. Let me just pause and say, walking stick. Uthi wena kakuhlukane nosinyusela nge-20 rand. So I want to assure Lagogo ukuthi mna di-generous anzomnyusela nge-20 rand. We are giving them an increase of 100 rand to the old age grant. Water veteran, disability care and grants. This will be split in 90 rand effective from April and 10 effective from October. 50 rand increase for the foster care and 20 rand increase to the child support grant.
Order.
We are
Order,
sensitive to the
Order.
increase in the cost of living for nearly 19 million South Africans who are really rely on these grants to make ends meet. In this regard, we have done as much as the fiscal envelope allows. Work is currently underway to improve the COVID-19 social relief of distress grant. By April the 1st, like all other grants, these grants are starting on the 1st of April. As the President has said, that is going to be improved. Work is being done. The Minister of Social Development is publishing regulations. When we finally gazette those regulations, the new grant and the figure will be published together with those regulations. These improvements will be within the fiscal framework. For the extension of the grant beyond 2025, we have made the point that it may have to find some revenue source for it. PAC. We have also made provision for key initiatives aimed at job creation. 61.4 billion is allocated for employment program over the medium term. 7.4 billion has been identified for the Presidential Employment Initiative. Government is also prioritizing fighting crime and corruption with a focus on enhancing law enforcement agency. Mamela, I was in that going on. If facts is on the table, we're doing the work. We're doing the work. As more, deliver. A total of 765 billion rand is allocated to peace and security cluster. In the coming financial year, 10,000 new police recruits will be trained. And as part of the country's responsibility to promote regional peace and stability, this budget will also allocate funding for the deployment of soldiers in Mozambique and DRC. Work on costing and identifying these needs for these critical missions will continue throughout the year, and funding will be allocated as such. 628 million has been allocated to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for the implementation of FATF and State Capture Commission recommendations, bringing the total funding to these efforts to 2.3 billion. Government is using 2.9 billion from the Criminal Asset Recovery Account to combat illegal mining and other priority crimes, with a 60% allocated, in fact 1.7 billion allocated for the deployment of the police, including vehicle procurement. This budget is also prioritizing infrastructure provision. Government plans to invest more than 943 billion rand in public infrastructure. Spending will support refurbishment and maintenance of existing assets, building of new infrastructure. Madam Speaker, 2.8 trillion, or put it differently, 5.1% of non-interest expenditure is allocated to provinces and municipalities over the next 3 years. 5.1.7 trillion is allocated to local government, and 2.2 trillion. An additional 105 billion is allocated to provinces for the next 3 years to cover the cost of implementing 2023 Public Service Wage Agreement, mainly in education and health sector. Provision of these additional funds will cushion the wage bill pressure faced by these critical personnel-intensive departments, while freeing up resources for capital investment and goods and services. Moreover, reductions that were previously made on some of the grants have been reversed. Restoring baseline of these grants will help maintain important service for the most vulnerable and provide for critical capital investment. However, to ensure public finances remain sustainable, the reductions are maintained to several other grants baseline, although many continue to grow over the next 3 years, despite the reductions. Regarding municipalities, an additional 1.4 billion is provided for municipal disaster recovery grant to fund the repair and reconstruction of infrastructure damage by the tragic floods of 2023. Madam Speaker, municipalities are the coalface of service delivery. Sadly, an unacceptable number of them are experiencing weaknesses in governance, financial management, and service delivery. To address these challenges and to transform municipalities into engines of growth, we have adopted a multi-pronged approach. It focuses on tightening budget processes, ramping up oversight, increasing the skills and capacity of municipal employees, and driving investment in maintaining and building infrastructure. Madam Speaker, this year the country hosts the annual meetings of the new development bank, which will happen for the second time since formation of the BRICS Bank. In 2025, South Africa takes on the presidency of the G20, following that of Brazil and India. Before that, South Africa's G20 president is an opportunity for us to advance the most pressing economic and developmental and financial issues that face poor and developing countries. As President Ramaphosa rightly stated in his State of the Nation address, our goal is to place Africa's development at the top of the agenda when we host the G20 in 25. We are working on the necessary allocations and identification of funds to make sure that the various events are a success. As we have shown recently, South Africa remains an important regional and international leader. Through participation and advocacy on platforms such as G20, we can push for substantive reform of multinational institutions like the World Bank and IMF, so that developing countries participate more equally in the decision-making process and global governance. Moral courage and know-how are not in short supply in our country. We should harness these gifts not only to better ourselves and our economy, but for the benefit of the entire continent. Madam Speaker, we've come a long way in the last 30 years. 30 years ahead of us, and whatever the challenges and opportunities they may bring are something we should look forward to. Given our difficult past and some of the inevitable challenges we have faced as a young democracy, trying to find its place in a world marked by a number of new and overlapping crises. It would be easy to indulge in extremes, either of blind optimism or crippling pessimism. We should resist both these extremes. Rather, we should heed the words of our first democratic President Nelson Mandela, who more than saw the pursuit of socio-economic justice and shared prosperity as a journey rather than a destination. Allow me to repeat what the President said in his closing remarks. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I've made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, the only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I've taken a moment to rest and to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me. To look back to the distance I have come, but I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibility. I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended. In the land. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I want to remind South Africans that the message they should take away from this budget. Government is making the most out of its way with limited resources. We continue to support economic growth, reduce growth of government debt and the cost of debt, allocate more funds for core services, and provide the social wage. I'm grateful to the President and Deputy President for their continued support and leadership. Thank you to the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. Masondo, and the excellent National Treasury team led by Director General Dr. Duncan Peterson, the majority of whom, Mr. President, are Tinswalos. Thank you to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services and the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank. Thank you to my colleagues, the ministers in the committee of the MINCOM Board and in the Budget Council, who shared the heavy load of the tough decision that meant to sustain the Department of Finances. To Parliamentary Command, my chairperson, Honorable Maswanganye, Honorable Telezi, of course, and to my wife and family, your love, support, and forbearance are daily inspiration. Lastly, thank you to you, each and every one of South Africans, and those who have been sending messages encouraging.
I thank the Honorable the Minister of Finance. Order. The papers tabled by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. Honorable members, I will now suspend proceedings until 3:20. I thank the honorable members. The House is adjourned.
Well, there you have it, South Africa. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Ino Godongwana, has just delivered the last budget speech of the 6th dispensation. And this is a budget speech that many academics and thought leaders out there have referred to as a legacy budget speech. And of course, as we know, the budget speech in this process, the Minister has tabled a number of key documents before the National Assembly. Number one, of course, is the 2024 Division of Revenue Bill. The second one is the 2024 Appropriation Bill. The third one is estimates of national expenditure. The fourth one there is the 2024 budget review, and the next one is the fiscal framework, and the next one is the second adjustment appropriation bill. And of course, as we know, these are all of the key documents that must be taken into consideration by the National Assembly in terms of just ensuring that allocations, as allocations are being made, that all the key considerations are actually taken into account. But one of the key things that we can pick up from the minister's speech is the fact that he reiterated that government is continuing to embark on a broad structural reform agenda, and that, of course, includes issues areas such as electricity. We know how access to electricity or stability within the energy sector has, of course, affected the economy. So, of course, that is an area of a key focus area for government as it stands. The next one, of course, is logistics. The next one is water, and another area is telecommunications and visa reforms. And those are the specifics that the minister has outlined in his speech. We are, of course, standing by for Tsepo, who's outside, who's just getting some reactions from members of parliament about what their thoughts are about the minister's speech. And over to you, Tsepo.
We are live outside the Cape Town City Hall, where the Minister of Finance has just delivered his budget speech, the last budget speech of the 6th administration, that is. And there are a lot of things that the minister mentioned. However, we are outside just to get some reactions from the members of parliament. And with me, I am joined by the leader of the NFP, Mr. Sheikh Imam. Sir, what are some of the reactions do you have on the last budget speech of the 6th administration?
Well, I must be honest, not impressive at all. First of all, there's a lot of emphasis on infrastructure. And you can see over the medium term, we're talking about over 900 somewhat billion. And we know and understand we don't have the capacity to be able to implement it. We've had this time and time again. Year in and year out, we talk about these things. Now, a very important point that the minister is not taking into consideration is the large sums of money equivalent to 40% on goods and services, which includes in infrastructure, that is lost to the economy every year because you don't get value for money. Now, the public procurement bill that we have now initiated, rightfully so, does not go far enough in addressing those concerns and challenges we have, which means this country is losing something like about 400 billion rand a year because you're not getting value for money. Now, we know with those infrastructure programs, many of them have either not been completed or large sums of money are being embezzled. We know that we have the construction mafia that are holding them hostage as far as that is concerned. We know they are being given out to organizations or companies who either don't qualify or do not have the capacity to be able to implement these things. Now let's look at the issue of the amount of money that is being directed to the safety and security cluster. Now, why not address what are the root causes of the high levels of crime and things in the country and the safety and security of our citizens, rather than recruiting more and more police officers? Should we not be ensuring that our police officers are better equipped, better paid, have decent danger allowances and things, are protected, and more importantly, deal with the socio-economic conditions under which our people are living? So you can bring in more and more police officers is not going to solve the problem. Now we talk about education, and he has allocated an X amount of money towards education. But again, what we're not addressing is the need to improve the quality of education in the country, which is resulting in many of whom, 60% of these that go to TVET colleges, drop out in the first year. Now, if you remember what the president said, he talked about easing visa regulations in order to have access to skills from internationally. But what about our skills? Because of what is happening with the limited economic growth, and you can see it's only 0.6%, it simply means more and more of our skills are going to leave the country. We welcome, however, the money that's allocated for the NHI, because the NHI can never be a success without large sums of money being made available. And more importantly, this might help us to protect and sustain those medical practitioners that have qualified, served the community service, and are not employed at the moment, and there are over 1,000 of them.
Now, the minister mentioned that their mission for the past 30 years has been to restore the economic and social justice of this country. Do you think they have achieved that?
South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. Inequality is greater today than it's ever been. More people are going hungry to bed. More people are dying of starvation. So I don't think it has been addressed. I can tell you what it has achieved, though. 17,500 black millionaires and multimillionaires have been created over the last couple of years, and the question is, what have they put back into the economy? How much has it, enhanced the lives of the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable? It certainly hasn't. We need to go back to the drawing board and look at the policies that we've put in place, whether it's working for the country or not. If it's not, we should be changing direction.
And then the minister did point out a few challenges. Apart from the all the achievements that they've come with so far in the past 30 years, he mentioned the challenges such as load shedding, which affects production, affects livelihoods, SMMEs, entrepreneurship opportunities. Do you think that there is enough being done in terms of consequence management and ensuring that the people that are involved in this maladministration come to book?
Well, first of all, I think it brought a smile on my face when the minister spoke about electric cars. I was trying to picture the scenario with all these electric cars parked on the freeways because there's no electricity. So it's good to dream. There's nothing wrong about that. And it's also good to have a progressive mind. But I think the most important thing is there has not been consequences. If you look at the amount of money, even he's setting aside for that security cluster, how many people have been imprisoned in terms of the 1 billion rand we spent on the state capture commission? So there is no consequences. In fact, it's not part of our vocabulary. If you look at the latest 5.19 billion rand lost in local municipality, and that's only 170 of the 257 municipalities that they have audited. So these are some of the problems, and how many of people have accounted for it? Hardly anybody, and nothing is going to happen about it. It's going to be on business as usual.
Thank you so much for that. That was Honorable Sheikh Imam, and here I am with Honorable Swartz. Thank you so much for giving us this review. So the minister has just announced his budget speech for 2024. It's the last one of the administration. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, we've always been relatively optimistic, but this time we are deeply concerned at the escalating debt, escalating budget deficit. We see the debt service costs are 356 billion rand per year. That crowds out expenditure on education, on health, on crime fighting. And now, because we're in this financial situation, this financial crisis, what the minister is now forced to do, which we don't support, is to go to the reserves, our foreign exchange reserves at the Reserve Bank, and take 150 billion rand there. Now, those reserves are there for the 2008 financial crisis. They're there to buttress your country when there's capital outflows. They're there to ensure your bank is properly solvent. And now that 150 billion rand is coming across to National Treasury. And how's it going to be spent? And next year again, when we've got the same situation, are we then going to empty the account totally, setting a very, very dangerous precedent which we don't support? On the positive side, one sees that personal income taxes have not been increased directly, although what we do see is bracket creep is there, so we are going to pay more. Fuel price has not increased, although there is another levy coming in there on carbon tax. So all these things put together, I'm afraid this does not get the ACDP support because of the economic policies that have resulted in low economic growth. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And we are still live outside the City Hall, and now I am joined by Honorable Kwankwa. Honorable Kwankwa, the budget speech has been delivered. There are a lot of things that the minister highlighted, flagged a lot of things that also also are challenges to this economy and the sixth administration as a whole. What do you think of the budget speech 2024?
Well, it was an elections budget. It's a pity that the government is broke, so they couldn't dole out monies and be handing out gifts and coming out with all sorts of nonsense. The fact that they decided, for instance, against increasing value-added tax when they have a serious problem, for example, financially revenue shortfalls, points to a direction where they didn't want to actually upset the public, especially the middle class, the working class. The other issue is the reason why they didn't increase the fuel levy. Under normal circumstances, they would have increased it. It's for the same reason. The reason why they've decided to increase social grants by 100 rands is simply because they are trying to say to people, if you vote for us, we are going to reward you. Guess what? We're going to give you one tranche of the increase now. The next one will come in October. So if you vote for us, we'll actually make sure that in October you're rewarded handsomely. That's what they are saying. But insofar as the management of the country's finances, it's a very bleak picture. The country is broke. We're not even able to generate enough revenue. Why? Because the policies of the ANC are not such that they're able to grow the South African economy. They actually strangle it, if you like, because they talk left and then walk right, which is actually the problem, which confuses the markets. We are still doling out guarantees of 47 billion rands, if you look at it, to Transnet, after all the inefficiencies and the problems that SOEs have given us. And we always lie to the public and say we're going to make sure that there are state conditions, but we give them guarantees. The conditions are always in place, but the money goes where? Into other people's comrades' pockets and not where it's supposed to go.
Now, talking about SOEs, I just asked one of the members here that do you think there is enough accountability and consequence management that is being implemented to ensure that SOEs come to a position where they are more sustainable and those that are the culprits are put to book?
No. There's no accountability, because if there was proper consequence management in the system, you'd hear of some of the DGs and members of the executives of SOEs who have been arrested, say, for example, in instances where monies have been stolen. You'd hear of people being fired, for example, for mismanagement of the SOEs. But the problem really is because they deploy cadres and not people who are fit for purpose. So it doesn't matter what people do, they do so with complete impunity because they've got the support of the governing party. And it's no longer about the voters and the people that we're supposed to be serving. It's about them protecting their own interests when they go into SOEs. Some of the SOEs in the past, SABC as a parastatal, retrenched many people. And guess what? When an audit was done, it was discovered that some of the people who were working there did not even have journalism experience or know nothing about journalism, but some of them were in managerial positions. Why? Because they were in the struggle somewhere.
Thank you so much for those reactions. So a lot of reaction with regards to the misappropriation of funds and a lot of reactions with regards to the debt that this country has been in. A lot of the issues, and I think this is something that goes even as far as there's the MTBPS that was given just last year. Members have been complaining about the debt that the country has and has been faced with. And even today, the minister has been talking about the deficit that this country has seen, especially in terms of the tax revenue that the country has managed to come with. And now I am joined by the leader of the ATN, Mr. Viola Zungula. Thank you so much for joining me. The minister has spoken. This is the last budget speech for 2024, the sixth administration at least. What are your thoughts on some of the things that the minister touched on?
You know what the budget speech did is almost the same as what the SONA did, which is to use it for campaigning purposes. But it is not sustainable in the sense that you've got a PIC that has got over 2.6 trillion rands that is available per annum towards its initiatives. But you find that there is no real drive from Treasury to influence PIC towards programs that are production in nature, programs that will make the economy to be stimulated towards growth. Because out of that 2.6 trillion, majority of that money goes towards, number one, big companies that are listed on the JSE, and secondly, programs that are consumer based in the sense that it is not programs that are, for example, manufacturing, the building of factories. Again, there's the issue of the lack of tax revenue. We're of the view that there's a missed opportunity in the informal sector because the industry, it has got more than 500 billion per annum, and this industry is dominated by people that are coming from other countries, coming to the country, making use of the infrastructure and public services, but they contribute nothing in terms of taxes. So we view that as a missed opportunity.
From what you have outlined right now, I think the biggest problem is the lack of opportunities for entrepreneurs. And looking at the situation, I mean, the minister even mentioned that load shedding is a problem. Do you think that enough is being done to ensure that opportunities such as entrepreneurial opportunities and opportunities for SMMEs to thrive in this economy are being made by government?
Not at all, because we're of the view as a party that any talk about prioritizing SMMEs must be backed up by legislation, because currently the government spends more than 80% of its budget on big business, and SMMEs and cooperatives are only scrambling for less than 20%. If there was any drive on prioritizing SMMEs, it needs to be legislated in the sense that a certain percentage of all government departments, entities must go towards small businesses. But we can't have a government that is just going to speak but not have legislation to back up their political ideas.
Now, the minister also mentioned the procurement of electrical vehicles, talked about ensuring that there is support and that there is funding for such and the infrastructure thereof. Looking at load shedding, do you think it's a bit of a dream that the government is telling to the nation?
Yeah, it's definitely a dream, because there's nowhere in one line you are going to have electric cars and encourage the procuring of electric cars once you've got a bigger problem of load shedding, because majority now of the middle class are trying to buy inverters because they are trying to deal with load shedding. What should they do now in the case of their cars not being able to have the being charged for them to be able to operate? So it's there's a conflict, there's a contrast in what the minister said versus what the reality is.
Then the last point. So the minister, they've increased by 100 Rand some of the pension monies, 100 Rand for the old ages, 50 Rand for foster care and so on. Do you think this is sustainable, especially in the economy that we're in at the moment?
It's definitely not sustainable. Whilst we do understand that people, the grant system is assisting in terms of poverty reduction, but the drive should be towards creating jobs and business opportunities so that people are able to live dignified lives on their own. Grants must only be there for people who cannot survive on their own. So the fact that we're going to have a government that is so proud in increasing the people that are dependent on grants, it means we don't have a government that is serious about job creation.
Thank you so much for that. So many reactions, and now I am joined by Dr. Dion George, who is the DA Shadow Minister. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Minister has spoken. What are your thoughts?
Well, as expected, it was a bailout budget for the ANC. The minister is now going to take 150 billion rand out of the contingency reserve of the Reserve Bank and basically throw it into a massive pit of debt, basically, and it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. What the minister needed to do was to make structural reforms. So, for example, cut back on the public sector wage bill and also not continue to bail out the state-owned enterprises. Although there is no direct bailouts, we still have the transfer of the debt onto the national balance sheet, which means that this is not going to sort out any problem with the debt at all. But most importantly, he completely ignored vulnerable South Africans. There are 5 million starving children in South Africa, according to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. He did not increase the child grant, which he could have done, although the social relief of distress grant will remain for another year. What happens after that, we don't know. And also what he could have done is he could have cut back on tax. For example, he could have cut the fuel tax, which would have made transportation less expensive and reduced the price of food. He could have expanded the zero VAT-rated food basket, but he did not do that. And in fact, he implemented a stealth tax, because by not adjusting the brackets for inflation, for tax, people's salaries have gone up because of inflation, but of course the tax bracket's not adjusted, so they're actually paying more tax. So it was, on the whole, a very disappointing budget from a government that simply doesn't care about battling South African households.
Thank you so much for that. Well, that was all those reactions that we could get from the 2024 budget outside the City Hall in Cape Town. Let's head back to the studio. I am Tsepo Mori signing back. Thank you.
That was Tsepo there outside the Cape Town City Hall, getting some reactions from members of Parliament based on what their party political views are about the speech that has just been delivered by the Minister of Finance. And of course, just coming back to some of the key points that have been made, Honourable Sheikh Imam there talking about the public procurement bill, talking to issues of value for money, the fact that this bill, in his view, does not address some of the key issues, because he he says that there's a lot of fiscal leakage that we see due to the fact that there's so many projects that are not completed. And of course, we can tie that in again to issues of state capability and continuing, and the state being on this drive to ensure that it continues to strengthen capability, not only at the national sphere, but across the three spheres of government. But of course, he also raises a very important issue, and this is a crime-related issue, and that is the issue of the challenge of the construction mafia. And that's one of the main reasons why projects are unable to be completed, because of the construction mafia. They interfere if they are unable to get business deals. With regards to that, they obstruct the process of completing projects. And of course, he also speaks to addressing the root causes of crime. People are obviously saying that the country is under siege, particularly in crime hotspots. We've seen a lot the issue of Diepsloot, for example, where the residents of Diepsloot have been talking about the fact that crime levels are so high, people are under siege there. But we also know that the president in his speech spoke to the project Chanela, and that is a project within the security cluster, within the policing system, to ensure that they address escalating crime levels, particularly at crime hotspots. But of course, Honorable Sheikh Imam there is saying that it is, as much as we are allocating money towards addressing the symptoms of the manifestation of crime across the broader across the society, we must also think about what are the root causes of crime, and then channel resources towards addressing the root causes of crime, so that we don't just deal with the manifestation of crime, but then we actually are fixing the social fabric, the social and the moral fabric of our society. He also spoke about, of course, the issue of skills leaving the country, and that he raised within the context of the doctors. There's more than 1,000 doctors that we know about who are currently not in employment, and if those doctors are not placed in the short to medium, within the near future, these are the kind of skills that the country will continue to lose if doctors who are qualified are unable, and not only doctors, and we're talking about people across the board, who have the necessary skill to build, to be part and parcel of building this democratic project of ours, then they will also leave the country. We also had some commentary from Honorable Swartz of the ACDP, who was talking about the fact that the minister was talking about an undertaking to take 150 billion from the Reserve Bank, and that is for servicing the debt that we have. And of course, as he's not the only one who raised issues about that. And of course, this is about ensuring that the economy has to grow in the long term, to ensure that, we don't continue borrowing and servicing debt and redirecting resources that is required for actually building the economy, and, for critical projects such as, our basic, social services, and access to key services, instead of servicing these debts. Honorable Kwankwa also made his inputs there, talking about the fact that, we have not been able to grow the economy, which is a fact, but of course, as we know, the minister also spoke about, the continuation of this focus on embarking on a broad structural reform agenda there, focusing on electricity, logistics, and of course, we know how important electricity is, electricity generation, in terms of advancing the country's transformation agenda and growing the economy as well, logistics, water, telecommunications, as well as visa reforms as well. But of course, the minister also spoke to allocations around education, reiterating that the education sector is allocated an additional 25.7 billion rand for the carry-through cost of the wage increase over the medium term, which is very important. In terms of school nutrition, the minister also spoke there about school nutrition. We know that particularly for those schools where children come from poor families and they are unable, obviously, they come home without having eaten a meal. The school nutrition program is so critical for ensuring that children are able to go to school and be able to learn and be productive within that space. And they're indicating that the program provides food to pupils in almost 20,000 schools across the country. With regards to early childhood development, the minister also indicated there that there's an allocation of 1.6 billion rising to that amount has been taken from 1.6 billion, I beg your pardon, to 2 billion over the medium term. And of course, we know about the other allocations, the increments that have been made with the permanent social grants. The increments there, we're looking here at the increase of 100 Rand to the old age, the veterans, as well as the disability and care dependency grants. And of course, that is important, particularly given the current state of our economy, and that puts food on the table for many South Africans who are unable to look after themselves. With that said, it's also important for us to remember that this is an electioneering year. The sixth term literally has just come to an end, with obviously the president having delivered his final State of the Nation of the sixth dispensation, and of course the Minister of Finance delivering this final budget speech of the sixth dispensation. In a few weeks we will be going to the elections, where all of these parties will be contesting for more space. And of course Parliament continues to play its role in terms of ensuring that it creates a platform for all political parties that are represented in Parliament to make their voices heard in a transparent manner, in a manner that represents the constituencies, that where they come from. With that said, we want to thank you very much for making the time to be with us today as we build up from the morning, creating context around all of the key issues, critical issues that still require government's intervention. But not only government intervention, but it requires social compacting from across various sectors in the country in order to take the country forward. With that said, do stay tuned for more after this. The proceedings in the National Assembly are shortly to be resumed. And my name is, of course, Dr. Sibolelo Mbulani.